It moved through Egypt without speaking. Faceless, nameless, it recognized a mark and ignored a voice. Houses were entered. Breath stopped where it stood. Children died where they slept. When judgment comes in God's name, it often announces itself with trumpets and fire, messengers. This time, there was nothing to see. Only the knowledge the next morning that something had passed through and left silence behind. Enforcement. And it did not need a name. If you too moved through Egypt without speaking, check out Pantheon, our brand inspired by myths, legends, and folklore. We ship worldwide and are rated excellent on Trustpilot. Link in the description. In the book of Exodus, judgment falls on Egypt 10 times. Rivers turn to blood, frogs swarm the land, flies choke the air, boils fester on skin, hail shatters the crops, locusts sweep in behind to finish what remains. Each plague builds on the last, an escalation of pressure, a demonstration of power that is as visible as it is strategic. Confrontation followed by consequence. The message is repeated louder each time. Let them go, but the Pharaoh doesn't bend, and the machinery of warning gives way to something else. So the 10th plague arrives. Simply happens. Exodus 12:23 records it in a line that passes quickly in the flow of instructions, but what it describes is colder than anything that came before it. The Lord will pass through to strike the Egyptians. But when he sees blood on the lintel and on the 2 doorposts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not allow the destroyer to enter your houses to strike you down. There is no name or description of what the destroyer looks like, where it comes from or how it moves. There is only the implication of a being, or perhaps a force, that is being held back. And when not held back, will carry out something irreversible. In Hebrew, the word used is ha-maskit, the destroyer. Not a destroyer, but the destroyer, the one assigned to carry out this act. The word mashkit denotes one who brings ruin, but it tells us nothing about form or identity. It is described only in terms of what it will be allowed to do. The earlier plagues were theatrical. Their power was in how they spoke. The Nile turning to blood was an insult to Egyptian religion. The frogs, the insects, the disease, the weather, all of them targeted specific elements of Egyptian life and belief. They could be interpreted. They could be resisted. Even in their horror, they were statements. But the final plague is a sentence. The blood on the doorposts is a mark, an instruction followed. The destroyer doesn't assess the people within each house, nor read hearts or consider conduct or ask who deserves to be spared. It responds to a sign. If the blood is there, the order is to pass over. If not, the order is to enter, and once it enters, the result is immediate and final, and what follows is absence. This absence is what defines it. The Lord will not allow it to enter. That is the boundary. There's no sense of engagement beyond that moment. The Israelites aren't spared because they're morally superior or have proven themselves worthy. They are spared because they followed a specific command, spared due to compliance. Religions would try to name what the text leaves unnamed. Interpretations arose, assigning it familiar roles, accuser, reaper, filling in the silence with borrowed identities. But none of these attributions belong to the passage itself. They are reflections of discomfort, attempts to make sense of a force that offers no such clarity. Elsewhere in Scripture, agents are introduced with specificity. Names are given, voices speak, appearances are recorded, even figures of opposition are allowed character. But here, there is only a task, just the destroyer, an act. Enemies can be identified, they can be watched, confronted, resisted. They exist within a narrative, cause conflict, consequence. But the destroyer arrives, destroys, and leaves. What passed through Egypt that night was the execution of an instruction, a silent obedience to an invisible condition. In the morning there were no signs of a presence, only the weight of what had been removed. Firstborns were gone. Grief had taken root, and no voice left to explain why. The destroyer is terrifying because it never needed anything at all. Power without a face. In a narrative that so often relies on divine encounters where angels speak and rebel, where visions overwhelm and names hold weight, this moment breaks the pattern. Something is permitted to slaughter, but nothing about it is revealed. To assign it a name would be to place it within structure. To define it would be to imagine a way to resist. But the destroyer? It exists only to pass through. The destroyer appears again in moments where death comes quickly. The pattern is familiar. Something is released, something is stopped, and in between people die. In the second book of Samuel, King David commits a sin by ordering a census of Israel. It seems like a minor act, but it is interpreted as an offense against God, a decision rooted in pride or mistrust. In response, David is offered 3 punishments, and he chooses the one that leaves the timing in God's hands: a plague across the land. What follows is quiet devastation. 70,000 people die. The text says that the angel stretches out its hand toward Jerusalem, ready to continue, but is told to stop. The destruction ends because it is halted. There's no suggestion that the angel chose to relent, just doing what it was sent to do, and it ceases only when told. The same event is recounted again in 1 Chronicles 21, but the account shifts focus. The destruction has already taken place. 70,000 are dead. The narrative then freezes on a single image, a figure standing between earth and sky, sword drawn, positioned over Jerusalem. The city waits beneath it. The sword remains raised. David sees the figure and steps forward, offering himself in place of the people. The angel remains where it is. The plague ends only when the command is given. The sword is lowered. The action stops. Authority flows in one direction. In Isaiah 37, the Assyrian army encamps around Jerusalem. The city braces for siege under the weight of overwhelming force, led by one of the most feared empires of the age. The text bypasses military strategy and diplomatic tension, leaping directly into the finality of the night. When the city sleeps, 185,000 soldiers perish. The angel of the Lord acts with total precision. Silence reigns where the clash of armies was expected. At dawn, the Assyrian camp remains frozen. Bodies carpet the earth. The momentum of conquest simply vanishes. The king retreats to Nineveh in a hollow silence. The siege ends in the cradle of its own beginning. The threat was erased in the shadows, an act of pure execution. Every command was fulfilled. Every strike was absolute. Only the dead remained. These records document power released and then recalled. They describe death administered with a sudden finality, halted by a superior command. This force remains dormant until the moment of choice. It acts until the word of restraint arrives. What moves through these stories is a singular function that remains static and silent. It exists beyond names or honor, an extension of will, a delegated presence, a sanctioned act. It appears, enforces, and withdraws. While the text refers to the angel of the Lord, the phrase remains a shadow. It serves for messengers. It serves for visions. It serves for the hand of God. Yet, here it remains a mystery. The text ignores the identity of the figure. The acts are too severe for symbolism. The God of the Hebrew Bible often speaks, intervenes, punishes, and relents. But in these moments, he employs a proxy. He releases a presence that avoids communication. He bypasses deliberation. He ignores questions. When God speaks, understanding remains possible. When this figure acts, only the loss remains. The plagues of Egypt displayed power. This displays something separate. This is divine will stripped of relationship. Judgment is outsourced to a force carrying only its task, its silence, and its absolute end. After the act, humanity searched for structure. The destroyer left only an aftermath, so the instinct was immediate. Give it form, assign a name, build a memory that the tongue could hold. Rabbinic scholars reached backward, pulling from known figures. Samael, the accuser, Azrael, the harvester. Later readers turned to Revelation and found Abaddon, commander of the pit. None of these figures originate from the moments of execution in Egypt or Jerusalem. Each was borrowed. Each attempt reflected a need to domesticate fear. The results remained fractured. Jewish commentary splintered. Christian writings shaped the figure into prophecy. Mystical text folded it into hierarchies. Every effort collapsed under the weight of its own speculation. The need to name speaks to human impulse. Names offer containment, introduce a force to language, art, and symbol. Once named, a power can be analyzed without being felt. It can be softened, integrated. The destroyer withheld that permission. While other agents carry war or messages, the destroyer rejects the story entirely. It appears through effect. It fulfills the command. It permits no negotiation between appearance and action. This isolation defines it. It remains separate from the recurring agents of intervention, standing apart from adversaries with motives or history, the release of force that terminates whatever lies in its path. God withheld identity because the act required no frame. This was a function built for a singular task, too severe to grant memory. Attempts to name it merely scattered the fear. They split the truth into avatars and doctrines, legends and myths, none of which could absorb what was loosed. The destroyer remains outside of all that. A presence untouched by theology, a sentence that continues long after the words end. The destroyer is never named, but throughout the same scriptures a different figure appears, one with a voice and a face. In the burning bush, an angel calls Moses by name. On a dusty road, an angel stops to argue with a prophet, the angel of the Lord. Think of this figure as a diplomat. A diplomat carries a message. He listens, he negotiates. When the diplomat is in the room, there is still time for a story to change. But when the time for talk is over, the diplomat leaves and the mechanism enters. Consider the nature of a soldier. Even the most disciplined soldier has a glitch in their obedience, their humanity. A soldier may look at a child or an innocent family and feel a moment of hesitation. They have a no inside them. They have a conscience that can act as a brake on a command. The destroyer is a soldier without the glitch. It is closer to an algorithm than a person. An algorithm doesn't hate the user. It doesn't feel joy when it executes a line of code or guilt when it deletes a database. It's simply a piece of hardware designed to recognize a specific signature. If the blood is on the door, the code says pass over. If the door is clean, the code says execute. This is the terror of perfect obedience. We usually fear rebellion, demons, chaos, or villains who have their own twisted agendas. We fear them because they are wild. But the destroyer represents a force that is tame to a terrifying degree. It has no agenda of its own. It's a servant so absolute that it has no ego, no hesitation, and no name. It is the undo command of the universe. When God speaks to Moses, he is a person. When he releases the destroyer, he is a system. We find comfort in the person because we can bargain with a heart. We recoil from the system because you cannot plead with a law of physics. You cannot bargain with a machine. The thing we fear most is the command fulfilled too perfectly. We fear the monster because the monster has a face. We can look into its eyes and understand its hunger. We can negotiate with a predator that wants something from us. But the destroyer offers no such recognition. It represents the terror of the absolute, the moment when the universe stops being a story and starts being a gravity. It's the weight we feel in the modern age when we realize our lives are governed by forces that don't require presence to operate. The cold, clean geometry of power that can remove life as easily as a hand brushing dust from a table. It is the predator that doesn't eat to survive. It is the fire that doesn't burn for warmth. It is a clinical removal of the self, a surgical strike against the soul. This is the legacy of the Nameless. It reminds us that beneath the layers of mercy and relationship, there is a coldness to the sacred. There is a part of the divine that isn't interested in your biography or your virtues. It is the part that views a king and a slave as the same mathematical requirement. There is no struggle because there is no one to fight. There is no plea because there is no one to listen. It is the ultimate expression of power, the ability to act without ever being present. The horror of the empty throne. The realization that sometimes the hand of God is simply a vacancy that moves through the room. It arrives to conclude you.